Greetings. This is the one you've known as Jesus the Christ. I'd like to say a little about growth today, since you're all in the midst of it, and growth is one of the basic truths about life. Every living thing grows. Every living thing evolves. You're probably familiar with the word entropy, which describes the natural decline and deterioration of matter that happens in the physical universe. Well, you could say there is also a law of growth. Living things cannot avoid evolving. They evolve physically and they evolve spiritually. For human beings, entropy is part of this growth, as decline of the physical form and loss of things and people in one's life are some of the most important catalysts of spiritual growth available in life. In my teachings, I like to emphasize that growth is always happening, whether you realize it or not, and that growth is the reward for the challenges in life, including the deterioration of the body and ultimate death. The growth that comes from these difficulties is God's reward, your soul's reward, and it is enough. To the mind, the spiritual rewards for overcoming difficulties are not enough, because the mind, the ego, doesn't value what is gained, and because, importantly, the ego believes that life should be easy and conform to its desires. The ego opposes life as it is. The ego's outcry is, life should not be hard. Life shouldn't be this way. This belief is a source of great suffering. When you oppose life, you'll always lose, because life is the way it is, and your wishing it to be otherwise only affects your state of consciousness, nothing else. Life is not designed to please your ego, but to please God. Besides, a life that would please the ego, which is most people's idea of heaven, would not be that interesting. When you're no longer physical, you'll try that out and discover for yourself that getting everything you want is not actually very satisfying or interesting. Your idea of heaven is not actually heavenly, because you are like God. You love the unknown, and you love testing yourself and learning and discovering new things. You actually love growth. It's just that the voice in your head convinces you to feel differently about life. That's bad. This is awful. I can't stand this. So that's how you feel. Your feelings determine your experience of life. They color your experience of life, but the true self is experiencing life without all the false self stories and feelings. Your true self is simply enjoying experiencing life, regardless of what that experience is. And when you're still, you can experience the true self rejoicing in every experience. This is the goal of the spiritual path, to unhook yourself from the ego's perceptions and the feelings that follow from that, so that your experience of life is that of your true selves, not the false selves. You are a divine being, and you eventually realize this by learning to overcome the suffering created by the false self. In your struggle to find true happiness and peace, you eventually discover the truth about life and the truth about yourself. That's growth. All growth is geared toward the evolution of the soul. The soul is evolving in many ways, so this growth takes many different forms. You grow in wisdom, skill, talents, and many other capabilities. You grow in your ability to love and form relationships. You grow in your ability to withstand difficulties and solve problems. You grow in compassion, empathy, and sensitivity. You move away from wanting superficial and selfish things to wanting the truth and what's best for all. You grow in all the ways that make you a better human being. This is really good news, especially since growth is inevitable and ongoing. Many people seem to not be growing. You may even feel that way about yourself at times, but that is impossible. People suffer because they resist the growth that's trying to come about, which is coming about, but that doesn't mean that growth isn't happening. If there's resistance to whatever's happening, then growth is probably happening more slowly than it needs to, but it's still happening. And the grace in life is that the suffering caused by resisting life often causes a breakthrough and shift to another state of consciousness. Growth can be painful or easy, depending on your attitude and your willingness to accept the circumstances that are catalyzing that growth. So you get to choose painful growth or easy growth, but no growth is not an option. Life will have its way with you. As I said, growth is a law of life, and laws cannot be opposed without consequences. Growth doesn't have to be painful. The ego makes it so because it says no to everything, especially to change. You're here to say yes to life. When you do, when you trust what life brings and embrace it, everything changes. You become happier and more peaceful. You never had to be unhappy or distressed. It was always possible to be happy. But you had to discover the real culprit of your unhappiness, which is your thoughts about life, not life itself. Your thoughts make you unhappy, not life. Your demands and expectations for life to be different than it is. I want to be sure that you understand that this resistance to life, which causes so much pain, is not your fault. It's not your fault that you have expectations, demands, desires, and ways of looking at life that make you unhappy. Every single person looks at life from this same lens. When you're human, this way of seeing life is baked in the cake. Having an ego and seeing the world as the ego does is synonymous with being human. But you are also divine, thank goodness. Thanks to God. Your divinity must come forward now. Your evolution must be accelerated. It's time for humanity to take a big leap in consciousness, because your very species is in peril if the majority of you remain in the current state of consciousness. You've seen the damage it has done, the difficulties it's caused in your relationships and within society, the greed, the selfishness, the lack of compassion, the hatred, and the prejudice. Human beings were better able to live in such a world when it was less populated. But now your world is crowded and your resources are stressed. So how will you deal with each other with limited resources in such close quarters if you remain in the egoic state of consciousness? Many other humanoid civilizations have reached this point and had to make dramatic changes to survive. Some survived, and some didn't. You are at a crossroads. It is unclear whether humanity in its current form will survive. We like to think it will, but even we are not sure of that. This is why transmissions are especially important. Transmissions are one of the ways we accelerate the spiritual evolution of a species. Although we transmit to people and to the earth to some extent, even without human beings acting as conduits for us, having conduits is very helpful, and more effective. Your ability to be a conduit for us is increased by being in the state opposite the egoic state, by being peaceful, at ease, loving, and willing to serve others. Being willing to serve others is especially important. Whenever anyone has a sincere desire to serve others, to help others, we are there. We or others like us. Please know that to be of service, all you need is a deep sincerity to serve and an ability to set aside your thoughts for a while you serve. This is what channels do, but you don't have to be a channel per se to serve as a channel for help and healing for others. Once you set aside your thoughts, your inner knowing can take over, and then you'll be moved to say and do whatever is needed. Anyone can do this who has enough sincerity and mastery over their thoughts to set them aside and just listen. Listen to the still small voice within, which is not a voice as much as a knowing and an impulse to speak and do. Let this knowing and impulse guide you in your actions and speech. Let it serve others through you. This is what the world needs now, more people with the intention and ability to be mouthpieces, arms, and legs for God, for those of us non-physical beings who are dedicated to serving humanity at this time. Doing this will be very fulfilling for you. To do this, you first have to believe that you can be of help this way, and you have to have some skill at moving into a state of quiet listening and then responding intuitively to what is wanting to be said and done. You all know how to do this, and many of you are already doing this work, but you can do this more often and more effectively if you actively ask that this be done through you. Make this your prayer to be an instrument of help and healing for others. The reason it's important to ask to be an instrument is that we need permission to use you in such a direct way, for it is against our rules to use you as fully as we can without your permission and cooperation. In a sense, you're entering an agreement or partnership with us, and that has to be acknowledged by you. So for those of you who work with others in your profession or less formally, please invite us or ask us to work through you before you begin working with them, and we'll be able to help you serve those people better and more directly. When servers or healers reach a certain level of ability to tune into us and work with us, our work with them can accelerate, but we still need an acknowledgement of their desire for us to work through them. So please be sure to call upon us when you serve others and at any other time that you would like our help. With your conscious cooperation, we can do so much more on earth. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your openness. We are with you always.